The words, "My daughter is not worth the investment," should have destroyed me completely. But instead, those brutal words marked a new beginning. Several months down the road, the very same man who spoke that crushing verdict reached out to me, his voice trembling with desperation, pleading for me to rescue our crumbling family. "I go by Rachel Morgan. I've lived 23 years on this planet, and what I'm about to share is how my own family wrote me off as worthless, as not deserving even one single dollar of support, until the moment arrived when losing me became something they simply couldn't survive. During those days, I was nothing more than an ordinary college kid with ambitions that refused to conform to the rigid expectations my family had established. The traditional paths like law school, finance, or any other so-called secure profession held zero appeal for me. What captivated me completely was design, the magic of colors, the artistry of typography, the power of communicating narratives through visual elements. For me, this wasn't some casual pastime or weekend hobby. This was the singular thing in my existence that truly resonated with meaning. To my family, however, my passion represented nothing but squandered time and wasted energy. The pivotal conversation that altered the trajectory of my entire life unfolded at our family dining table. There were no screaming matches, no theatrical thunderstorms raging outside the windows, no plates smashing against walls. Just a detached, clinical judgment handed down as casually as reading numbers from a financial report. "You're not worth the investment." Those exact words. Not, "Your chosen degree lacks practical application." Not, "We're financially stretched too thin to cover tuition at this moment." The verdict was personal. It was about me. I had become the failing stock, the risky asset, the investment they chose to liquidate before incurring additional losses. I can still picture myself frozen in that chair, staring blankly at the untouched food on my plate. The devastating realization washing over me that the very individuals who should have championed me above anyone else had just publicly declared me officially not worth their faith or resources. That's when I made my choice. Since they refused to place any bet on me, I decided I would invest everything in myself. I gathered my belongings into just 2 suitcases, collected my precious sketchbooks, and walked straight out of that house. No theatrical farewell scene played out. Nobody rushed after me begging me to stay. No 11th hour apology materialized. Just complete, hollow silence, as though they had already mentally adjusted to an existence without me in it. I wasn't fleeing from the prospect of failure. Instead, I was moving deliberately toward the single person who remained firmly in my corner: myself. I discovered a cramped little room that stretched my financial limits to the breaking point. I grabbed the very first employment opportunity that presented itself, working at a modest cafe, and I made myself one unwavering promise. I would transform their dismissal into undeniable evidence that their assessment of me was fundamentally wrong. At that point, I had no roadmap for how this would unfold. I couldn't have predicted that eventually people would willingly pay substantial money for my creative designs, or that I'd earn the responsibility of developing the entire brand identity for a legitimate company. I couldn't foresee that my professional output would evolve into precisely the kind of valuable investment my family never possessed the vision to recognize. The only certainty I carried was this fundamental truth: if I ever crumbled and broke apart, it absolutely would not be because they had decided I wasn't sufficient. Several months elapsed, and gradually my existence began taking a shape that filled me with genuine pride. Then my phone illuminated with an incoming call from a number I recognized instantly, but hadn't encountered in nearly 12 full months. I paused, hesitating. I absolutely could have sent it to voicemail. I could have continued crafting lattes, submitting design proposals to potential clients, and maintaining the comfortable fiction that my former life had ceased to exist. But I didn't choose that path. I answered. "Rachel." The voice emerged from the speaker, fractured with obvious stress and profound discomfort. "We need your help." The identical people who had once pronounced me unworthy of investment were suddenly approaching me as though I represented their final lifeline. Do you want to understand how we progressed from that devastating sentence spoken at the dining table to this frantic, desperate phone call? how the official family disappointment transformed into the individual wielding all the control and power. If you've ever experienced being evaluated as a poor investment by your own flesh and blood, stay with me through to the conclusion, because I'm going to demonstrate precisely how I converted their brutal rejection into both my personal vindication and my promising future. During those initial days after leaving home, basic survival took absolute priority over any thoughts of revenge. I relocated to a cramped studio apartment featuring peeling paint and paper-thin walls, where the sounds of my neighbors arguing, laughing, and conducting their daily lives penetrated constantly, reminding me I existed outside their worlds. The monthly rent consumed nearly every cent I managed to earn. Consequently, I seized the first available position, which turned out to be serving as a barista at this warm, inviting cafe with the name The Creative Cup. That name struck me as almost prophetic, like a meaningful sign. Throughout the daylight hours, I operated espresso machines, created perfectly frothed milk, and wiped down countless tables. My work apron absorbed the persistent aromas of roasted coffee and sweet sugar. My feet developed a constant dull ache, and my hands maintained a perpetual slight stickiness. Yet behind that customer counter, attached to the wall positioned near the cash register, I displayed a tiny fragment of my authentic self, a straightforward flyer I had personally designed, advertising custom logo creation, social media graphics, and affordable branding services. The print quality was cheap, the paper was basic, but the work represented me completely. Initially, nobody paid it the slightest attention. Customers placed orders for caramel lattes and iced Americanos without so much as a single glance toward my promotional flyer. Still, I maintained its position there. During every scheduled break, I retrieved either my sketchbook or my digital tablet, continuously refining creative concepts, experimenting with diverse color palette combinations, teaching myself increasingly sophisticated techniques regarding typography and visual layout. Then one particular afternoon, this woman appeared, probably in her 30s, possessing sharp, observant eyes, wearing her hair pulled back in a casual messy bun, her laptop plastered with an eclectic collection of stickers. She remained standing at the counter considerably longer than typical customers. Eventually, she gestured toward the flyer with her finger. "Did you make this?" she inquired. "Yes," I responded, quickly wiping my hands against my apron. "I'm trying to build a portfolio." She examined it once more, then shifted her gaze back to meet mine directly. "It's good. I'm a freelance designer too. Start with people around you. Small businesses, local events, anything. Just get your work out there." Her name turned out to be Jennifer, and regardless of whether she intended this outcome or not, that brief, simple conversation fundamentally shifted my trajectory. She transformed into a regular visitor, consistently arriving with her laptop, perpetually working on some creative project. Occasionally, during periods when customer traffic slowed down, she'd gesture for me to come over, then show me whatever design she was currently developing. Quote, 11. She remarked during one such occasion, directing my attention towards her screen. Quote, 12. Her words clung to my consciousness far longer than the coffee aroma that saturated my clothes. Following her practical guidance, I began offering free or significantly reduced price design work for local bake sales, charitable events, and modest online shops operated by individuals we regularly encountered at the cafe. I remained awake deep into the night, following my exhausting shifts, my eyes burning from strain, my back aching from poor posture, constructing visual materials that transformed someone else's abstract idea into tangible reality. The financial compensation remained minimal, frequently nothing beyond a sincere thank you message and a tagged social media post. However, with each successive project completion, I observed something fundamental shifting, not merely in my growing portfolio, but in the manner people perceived me. At the cafe, my identity evolved beyond simply being the girl who restocked the pastries. I had become recognized as the designer. Regular customers began approaching me, asking whether I might assist with creating business cards, designing menus, or developing Instagram posts. Word circulated through quiet, organic channels. "She's really good," She designed this for me. You should ask her. Meanwhile, within my cramped, perpetually cluttered studio apartment, I established a corner space that evolved into my personal sanctuary. The setup consisted of a second-hand desk, a chair discovered at a thrift store, an inexpensive lamp, and my digital tablet. I constructed a basic website utilizing a free template, uploaded examples of my completed work, and positioned a straightforward statement on the homepage. I design brands for people who refuse to stay small. The message wasn't exclusively about my clients, it fundamentally reflected my own journey. Each time I clicked publish on a newly completed project, I mentally conjured my father's harsh voice, echoing those words, "You're not worth the investment." Every single time a client processed an invoice payment, regardless of how modest the amount, I imagined that devastating sentence developing tiny cracks, slowly breaking apart. Physical and mental exhaustion became my constant companion as I juggled early morning shifts with late-night design marathons. Yet for the very first time in my existence, I could actually visualize a version of myself that existed independently, completely separate from my family's approval or validation. My identity as their disappointment had dissolved. I was actively transforming into my own authentic success story, quietly and steadily, brick by individual brick. What remained unknown to me during this period was that one of these seemingly small, modest projects would shortly connect me with a client who would fundamentally change everything, placing me directly on the path leading to that desperate, pleading phone call I would eventually answer. The chain of events initiated with a cafe regular who consistently ordered an oat milk latte and spent extended hours working on her laptop at the corner table. One afternoon, she approached the counter precisely as I was wiping down the espresso machine. Quote 17, she said, "So, quote 18, I froze momentarily. Quote 19, she offered a warm smile. Quote 20. My heart pounded so intensely and loudly I struggled to hear my own response forming. Quote 21, I managed to say. Quote 22, we arranged a meeting scheduled after my shift concluded. I presented my portfolio to her, displaying small projects like charity posters and cafe menus. Nothing particularly flashy, nothing with corporate polish, but everything authentically mine. She scrolled through slowly, nodding thoughtfully, asking perceptive questions. Quote 23, she explained. Quote 24. I comprehended that specific feeling far more deeply than she could have realized. We commenced working collaboratively. I devoted nights to sketching various logo concepts, experimenting with typography that conveyed both boldness and warmth simultaneously. I carefully curated color palettes that extended beyond predictable green tones, incorporating earthy, grounded, modern elements. Together, we designed product packaging, social media template systems, and complete website layouts. Amanda provided constructive feedback throughout the process, yet she genuinely trusted my vision and instincts. Quote 25, she'd frequently say, "You clearly know what you're doing." Each time she expressed that sentiment, it felt like pouring solid concrete into the foundation of my growing confidence. Several weeks later, when GreenPath's pre-launch campaign went live publicly, people immediately noticed. Social media engagement metrics spiked dramatically. Inquiry emails flooded in. Other emerging small brands began following GreenPath's accounts and asking, "Who did your branding?" Amanda consistently answered identically. Rachel did. She personally referred me to 2 additional clients. Those clients subsequently referred me to others. The scale of projects grew progressively larger. The invoice amounts increased proportionally. My tiny studio corner workspace transformed into a comprehensive, full-scale workstation. Sticky notes covered every available surface. Design files accumulated in meticulously organized digital folders. Deadline dates filled every square of my wall calendar. One particular night, as I was exporting the final files for GreenPath's official public launch, an email arrived that literally made me stop breathing momentarily. Quote 29. The message originated from a prestigious design institute I had submitted an application to months earlier, almost as a personal dare to myself, back during the period when I still internalized the identity of being that quote 30. I remained seated there, staring fixedly at the screen, reading and rereading the words repeatedly. I had gained acceptance, without anyone manipulating strings behind the scenes, without anyone financing my pathway, without anyone vouching for my abilities except the quality of my own independent work. For the very first time, something crystallized with absolute clarity in my understanding. My fundamental worth had never been dependent on my family's approval or validation. They simply lacked the imagination and vision required to recognize it. I wish I could claim that I celebrated by gathering friends together, popping champagne bottles, and dancing joyfully around my apartment. Instead, the reality was far quieter. I simply closed my laptop carefully, reclined back onto my bed, and allowed a single profound thought to fully sink in. If they could observe me at this moment, would they still maintain their belief that I wasn't worth investing in? I remained unaware that very soon they would indeed see me. Not because I voluntarily returned to them seeking reconciliation, but because their carefully constructed world was approaching total collapse, and they'd come desperately searching for the one individual they had previously treated as completely disposable. Me. The moment arrived on a Tuesday. I was completing final revisions on a logo design for a local bakery when my phone vibrated with an incoming notification. I glanced casually at the screen, anticipating a client message or a text from a friend. Instead, a name appeared that I hadn't encountered in nearly a full year. Mom. Every single muscle throughout my body tensed immediately. For an extended moment, I simply stared at the glowing notification. My initial instinct urged me to allow it to fade away unanswered, to maintain the pretense that I hadn't observed it. But curiosity operates as a cruel force. I opened the message. Rachel, I know we haven't spoken in a while. Things have been difficult here. Your father lost his job. The business isn't doing well. We're in trouble. Can we talk? We really need your help. I read through it 3 separate times, each word activating old emotional responses like dust particles, rising from a carpet that had been repeatedly stomped on far too many times. The message contained no apology whatsoever. No acknowledgement stating, I'm sorry for what we said to you. No recognition of the psychological damage they'd inflicted. Simply, quote, 33. I tossed my phone onto the bed and began pacing throughout my tiny room. My chest felt constricted and tight, though not from fear this particular time. Anger burned through me. After absolutely everything that had transpired, after explicitly telling me I wasn't deserving of their money, their trust, their basic belief in me, suddenly my value had been rediscovered. A portion of me desperately wanted to ignore them entirely, to allow them to experience the full consequences of their previous choices without any involvement from me. Another portion of me, the part that still retained memories of movie nights, birthday cakes, and the way my mother used to gently fix my hair before school, experienced something heavier and more complex: guilt, responsibility, the residual instinct to protect the very individuals who had wounded me so deeply. I brought my internal conflict to Jennifer the following day. She occupied her customary corner table in the cafe, laptop open, hands wrapped warmly around her coffee mug. They only messaged you because they need something, she stated matter-of-factly after I displayed the text to her. Not because they suddenly realized they were wrong. I know, I admitted, but they're still my family. She held my gaze steadily. Being your family doesn't give them unlimited access to you or your skills or your emotional energy. You're allowed to choose how much of yourself you give to them. I resented the fact that she was absolutely right. I resented feeling like a confused child still waiting for someone external to provide direction about what actions to take. What would you do? I asked her directly. She paused, considering thoughtfully for a moment. I'd ask myself one question. Can I help without destroying myself in the process? If the answer is no, then the answer is no. That evening, I stared at my phone again, rereading my mother's message carefully. Every single line translated internally to one fundamental message. We didn't believe in you during the period when you genuinely needed us. Now that we find ourselves needing something, we suddenly remember your existence. Part of me wanted to compose an immediate reply, something sharp and absolutely final. You made your choice. Live with it. But I didn't follow through. Instead, my fingers typed, quote, 42, quote. My thumb hovered uncertainly over the send button for a complete 10 seconds. Then I exhaled slowly and pressed it firmly. The instant the message transmitted, my phone buzzed again with a response. A time existed in my past when I would have immediately rearranged my entire life schedule around a request like that one. This particular time, I consulted my calendar first, reviewing my commitments, my professional deadlines, my own established life. I selected a meeting time that accommodated my schedule, not theirs. I didn't fully recognize it during that moment, but that seemingly small decision represented the very first genuine boundary I had ever established with my family. And shortly I was preparing to walk into a meeting that would demonstrate to them precisely who I had evolved into without their support or involvement. The cafe where we mutually agreed to meet served as neutral territory, positioned somewhere between my independent world and their familiar realm. I arrived exactly 10 minutes early, my palms perspiring despite the cool ambient air. I ordered a beverage simply to occupy my hands with something tangible. When the entrance door finally swung open and my mother walked through, my heart seemed to plummet directly into my stomach. She appeared noticeably older than my memory held, displaying more pronounced lines etched across her face, exhausted eyes, shoulders carrying a slight hunch. Upon seeing me, she hesitated briefly, then offered a small, uncertain smile. "Rachel," she said softly. I responded with a simple nod. "Hi." We settled into our seats, the silence stretching between us heavy enough to feel physically crushing. For an extended moment, neither of us uttered anything. Then she inhaled a deep breath. "Things have been bad," she began carefully. "Your father lost his job, and the business is falling apart. We've made mistakes. We should have handled things differently with you. But right now, we really need—" My chest tightened painfully. "Stop," I interrupted, more sharply than I had originally intended. She appeared genuinely startled. "You should have handled things differently," I repeated her words back. "You told me I wasn't worth investing in. That wasn't a bad choice or a simple misunderstanding. That was a verdict." Her eyes filled rapidly with tears. "We were under a lot of pressure. Your father was stressed, and what?" I cut in directly. "You both decided that my dreams were disposable, that I was disposable." The memories came flooding back with intensity. The dining table scene, the cold, detached tone, the casual manner in which my entire future had been dismissed like irrelevant paperwork. I leaned forward across the table. "You didn't just say no to paying for my education," I continued steadily. "You said I wasn't worth it. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" She wiped at her cheeks, her voice trembling noticeably. "We thought you'd understand. We thought you'd choose something more stable. We were scared for you." "Scared for me?" I released a bitter laugh. "No, you were scared of me failing in a way that made you look bad." I could observe the words landing like physical blows, but I couldn't force myself to stop. "Quote, 59, I said. Quote, 60, up. Quote, 61. She whispered faintly. Quote, 62. The concept of my father silently viewing my professional work, quietly recognizing it without acknowledgement, made my jaw clench involuntarily. Quote, 63. I asked pointedly. Quote, 64. She swallowed with visible difficulty. Quote, 65. Quote, 66. I stated firmly. I sat back in my chair, my heartbeat pounding audibly in my ears. I told her directly. A couple seated at a nearby table glanced over briefly, but I didn't care whatsoever. For months, I continued, maintaining a low but firm voice, I worked myself to the bone trying to prove I was worth something. Not to clients, not to strangers, to you. And now the only reason you're here is because you need me to fix what's broken. My mother looked downward, tears dropping steadily onto her hands folded on the table. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I added, after a measured pause. I'm saying it because you need to hear it. You can't treat people like bad investments and then complain when they stop being available. She sniffed audibly. So, that's it? You won't help us? I hesitated, the internal conflict rising. The old version of me, the one who perpetually wanted to be good enough, useful enough, lovable enough, screamed internally to say yes, immediately. But the person I had actively become understood better. No, I said quietly but clearly. Not like this. Not as a bandage for the damage you helped create. I won't be your emergency option. She closed her eyes, profound pain etched visibly into her expression. I'm leaving now, I announced, standing up from the table. I hope you figure things out, but I'm not your solution. As I walked out of the cafe entrance, my hands were shaking noticeably, though not from fear this time. The trembling came from freedom. For the very first time in my existence, I had consciously chosen myself over them. But that encounter wasn't the conclusion of the situation, because walking away proves easy. Living with whatever comes after that departure, that's where the genuine test truly began. For multiple days following that confrontational meeting, I moved through my daily routines operating on complete autopilot. I pulled espresso shots, designed logos, responded to client emails punctually, but my mind kept replaying my mother's face at that table repeatedly. The hurt visible in her eyes, the cracks audible in her voice. I didn't regret the words I'd spoken, but I couldn't pretend the encounter hadn't left a significant mark on me as well. Jennifer noticed the change almost immediately. Quote, 78. She observed one afternoon, closing her laptop deliberately. Quote, 79. I sighed heavily, leaning against the counter for support. Quote, 80. Quote, 81. Jennifer repeated slowly, nodding with approval. Quote, 82. Quote, 83. I admitted honestly. Quote, 84. Quote, 85, she said firmly. Quote, 86. I played absently with the edge of my apron. Quote, 87. Jennifer gave me a knowing look. Quote, 88. I recognized intellectually that she was correct, but knowing something and feeling it represent two vastly different experiences. Throughout the next several weeks, professional work accelerated even further. GreenPath's official launch proved remarkably successful. Their follower count grew exponentially, orders increased substantially, and Amanda sent me an enthusiastic voice message late one evening. We did it. People love the brand, Rachel. Thank you for believing in this with me. Her gratitude arrived simple, genuine, and clean. I mentally contrasted that authentic appreciation with my family's sudden renewed interest in my professional abilities. One relationship had been constructed on mutual respect and trust. The other had been built on control mechanisms and conditional acceptance. I started to comprehend something profoundly important. Revenge didn't necessarily have to resemble watching them fail catastrophically. Revenge could simply be living well, thriving independently, without permitting them to pull me back into the destructive patterns that had previously broken me. However, genuine closure still felt frustratingly out of reach. One evening, after an exhaustingly long day, I sat in my studio corner, workspace, staring at a half-finished layout displayed on my screen. The colors blurred visually as my thoughts drifted elsewhere. I opened my messages to my mother. No new texts awaited, no follow-up communications, just the last conversation preserved there, her asking for assistance, me declining firmly. I typed and subsequently deleted at least 10 completely different draft responses, ranging from cold and distant to overly gentle and accommodating. Nothing felt authentically right. Then an idea gradually formed, not about fixing their business problems, but about fixing something fractured within myself. I didn't want to help them purely out of obligation or guilt, but I did want to know with certainty that if I walked away permanently, I had done it on my own terms, not merely reacting out of anger or hurt. I needed them to see me clearly just once, not as a disappointment, not as a convenient tool to be utilized, but as a complete person with defined limits, personal power, and autonomous choices. So I composed and sent a new message, quote, 90. This time, the reply arrived considerably slower, quote, 91. I selected the same cafe, the same neutral ground location. But I was absolutely determined that this particular time I wouldn't be walking in as the wounded daughter desperately seeking validation. I would be walking in as the capable woman I had deliberately built myself into. I closed my messages, took a deep, centering breath, and whispered aloud to the empty room surrounding me. This time, I set the terms. The second meeting felt fundamentally different from the very moment I walked through the entrance. I wasn't early. I wasn't late. I arrived precisely on time, head held high, shoulders relaxed and confident. When I spotted my mother already seated at the table, she was waiting, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes appearing distant and troubled. "Hi," I said clearly, sliding into the seat positioned across from her. "Hi," she replied softly. For a moment, we simply sat there together, the accumulated weight of everything unsaid pressing heavily between us like a physical presence. "I'm not here to revisit every detail of the past," I began directly. "We both know what was said. We both know the damage it caused." She nodded slowly, eyes becoming glossy with moisture. "We do. I'm here," I continued steadily, "to make one thing clear. I have a life now, a career, clients who respect me, a future I'm building with my own two hands. That life is not up for negotiation." Her lips trembled slightly at my words. "I understand." "Do you?" I asked gently but firmly, because when you reached out, it felt like I suddenly had value because I could solve a problem for you. Not because I'm your daughter, not because of who I am, but because of what I can do. She visibly flinched at that observation, but she didn't attempt to deny it. "Quote 103, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Quote 100. The admission genuinely surprised me. Quote 105, she added with evident pain. Quote 106. There it was, finally, spoken aloud. The fundamental truth I'd been chasing for years, desperately needing to hear. "I'm not telling you this to ask for your forgiveness," she continued. "I'm telling you because you deserve to hear it. You deserved better than what we gave you." The burning anger contained in my chest softened slightly, just a fraction. "So, what happens now?" she asked hesitantly. "What does this look like, if anything, between us?" I took a slow, deliberate breath before responding. "Here's what I'm willing to offer," I said carefully. "I'm willing to talk, to have some kind of relationship, but it has to be on solid ground. No guilt tripping, no using me only when things go wrong, no expecting me to fix your financial mess." She nodded slowly, processing. "We won't ask you to do that. If at some point," I continued, "you want professional help with branding or design, you can approach me the same way any other client does. Formally, clearly, with respect, and you'll pay my rates. No family discount, no emotional leverage." A faint, sad smile crossed her weathered face. "You really have changed." "I had to," I replied simply. "Your version of me didn't survive." We sat with that heavy truth for a measured moment. "I don't know if your father will ever say the words you want to hear," she admitted with resignation. "He's proud in his own way, stubborn, but I know he's seen your work, and I know he's realized how wrong he was." "That's his burden to carry," I stated clearly, "and not mine." Tears slipped down her cheeks steadily, but this time I didn't feel that familiar pull to fix her emotions or comfort her pain. Quote 123, I added quietly after a pause. Quote 124. Quote 125. Quote, "What does 126? She asked, confusion evident. Quote 107, I said, meeting her eyes directly with unwavering certainty. Quote 128. She nodded, a tearful understanding visibly settling into her expression. She whispered. We conversed for a while longer, the conversation flowing more naturally, not about the failing business, not about money problems, but about smaller, simpler things. My ongoing work, her neglected garden, the neighborhood gossip, the little ordinary details that used to fill the home we once shared together. When the conversation naturally wound down, there was no big embrace, no cinematic reconciliation scene playing out. Just two individuals acknowledging that the past would always exist there between us, but the future didn't have to be ruled and controlled by it. "I'm glad you came," she said as we both stood to leave, "even if it's just to set boundaries. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." "I was always this strong," I replied honestly. "You just couldn't see it." We walked out of the cafe separately, each going our own direction. As the door closed firmly behind me, the evening air felt noticeably different. Not lighter exactly, but somehow clearer, more breathable. I didn't feel like the broken girl who had departed home carrying 2 suitcases and a completely shattered sense of worth. I felt like someone who had constructed herself from the ground up, piece by piece. My phone buzzed with activity as I walked down the street. A new email notification from Amanda regarding another collaborative project. A message from Jennifer asking how the meeting went. A notification from GreenPath's social media platforms where my designs were being shared again and again, reaching new audiences. My life was full and complete. Not perfect, not painless, but genuinely full. The people who once labeled me a bad investment had finally been forced to confront the undeniable truth. I was never the problem. They just didn't possess the capability to measure my worth accurately. And now they don't get to.